All right, let's go ahead and get started here. We're excited to be meeting with you all today and really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join this webinar. Today, we're going to be covering mastering MCPs, how AI coding copilots supercharge legacy code workflows. Really what this is going to be is a technical deep dive for showing how engineering teams are using model context protocol. So we're going to show some pretty cool stuff here today and are really excited that y'all can join us. Before we jump straight into MCPs, let me give you a little bit of background into who PureCode is. Go ahead, Sean. So we're an Austin-based startup founded in 2023. Really, our mission is to provide an industry-leading AI coding co-pilot focused on supporting legacy code bases. That's something that we feel like was really missing in the market, and we're very excited about the progress that we've had so far. We currently support over 1,000 enterprises, 50,000 developers, and we write 100 million lines of code per month. Enough about kind of the PureCode background. Let me tell you about who we are and who's going to be joining us on this call today. Quick intro on myself. My name is Cam Edmonds. I'm one of our enterprise account executives at PureCode, and I lead our sales team. Alongside me, kind of in the background, is going to be our COO and co-founder, Ben White. And then we've also got our head of growth, Abhishek KG, who's going to be joining us and help set up this webinar. All right, let's go into a quick agenda for what we're covering today. We'll start with a really high-level overview of what Model Context Protocol is, and we'll refer to that as MCP going forward through the rest of this webinar. But basically what it is, how it works, and how to use it today. From here, Sean, who I'm going to introduce you all to in just a second, is going to be showing you his top 10 MCPs that you should be using today for real applications. We'll show you how to set up the most common MCP servers like GitHub and Figma, a lot of the tools that you're using today that we can really help leverage. And then from there, we're going to go into how PureCode AI enables team-based governance, control, and permissions over MCPs. Talk about some security options as well. And we'll kind of cover that within our Q&A also. Just want to mention that the last 5 to 10 minutes of this call, we're going to have a Q&A. So as we're going here, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom. Throw in questions there. We're going to be monitoring that. Ben and KG will be monitoring that in the background. So any questions that you have along the way, throw them in there, and then we'll address a Q&A at the end here. All right, and then let me intro you to our today's presenter. This is going to be our lead solutions engineer, Sean McCarthy. Sean is a former AI engineer at IBM, and he's implemented AI agents for multiple Fortune 500 companies. And for today, he's going to be our MCP integration expert. So without further ado, Sean, we're all excited to hear what you have to say.
All right, thank you, Cam. And thank you everyone else for joining today and taking some time out of your busy days to listen to me talk about Model Context Protocol, or MCPs. So, many or some of you may be asking, what is Model Context Protocol? Well, as you can see here on my screen, by definition, it is an open source standardized framework that enables AI models like LLMs to securely and consistently connect to external tools, data sources, and real-time information. So what does that actually mean, right? Because that can be a little bit confusing and technical here for us. So if you go to this next slide, we can see this diagram here. And essentially, MCPs are a universal adapter for AI agents. So the same way that an API connects your code base to external services, MCPs will provide that direct, secure connection between an AI agent and then tools like GitHub, web search, and then even local tools like database controls and the file system. Now, to dig a layer deeper, there are two main components to the Model Context Protocol itself. There's the MCP client, and then there is the MCP server. So for our purposes today, PureCode AI is going to act as our MCP client and our host. And so the real focus on this session is going to be the MCP servers and how to configure them. So the server itself is an actual proxy that will host these specific tools for your agent. These tools are going to be things like reading terminal output or even allowing external operations like getting a repo from GitHub or creating a pull request. With that said, there are currently 3 different ways that MCPs can be deployed, or at least the MCP servers. So the first one here is going to be as a local process. It's essentially just running a node process or an executable directly on your machine. That server will be hosted on your laptop or your computer, and from there it will have a direct connection to the agent. The second way that you can deploy this is a Docker container. So it is going to be a local Docker container. It does require your workstation to be running Docker locally. So I just want to point that out. And then lastly, the other option is a remote MCP server. So these services simply provide you, a live URL, their endpoint, which is then passed to the models via PureCode. So now that you hopefully have some baseline understanding of what an MCP is, I think the next important thing to know is what MCPs are available, what should I be using? So to start off here, I have compiled a list of what I believe are the top 10 MCPs for enterprises and things that you should consider using today. So starting from the top here, we do have some general MCPs that are good for everyone. That's, developers, operations, and even project management. So that's going to be things like your first one, which is source control. So whether you use GitHub, GitLab, or even Bitbucket, there is an MCP for each of those available. And this will essentially allow you to do all of the different tasks, depending on the permissions that you set. So whether that's reading files from your repos, creating comments, creating pull requests, or even pushing up code, all of that is possible through these MCPs here. So the next one after that I think is really important is going to be the ticketing and an internal context. So here that's going to be things like your Jira MCP, and again, the GitHub MCP also, if you're using GitHub issues, that is the same as MCP, it just has both functionalities there. And then obviously things like Linear, if you're using that for your ticketing, and then Notion for any internal documentation or context that you may have. Now we can get into some of the more interesting MCPs on this list. The third one here is going to be the sequential thinking MCP. And essentially what that does is it enables chain of thought reasoning. And so for those who don't know, what chain of thought reasoning is essentially a way to improve the quality of the output from these agents. It allows them to essentially think in steps in a linear fashion and make sure that they cover all of their tracks before moving on to the next step. And then to add into that, we have number 4 here, which is the memory knowledge graph MCP. This essentially is going to create a local memory source on your computer that the AIs can reference. So this will give you essentially long-term memory for your agents. It's not limited by the context window at this point. Any conversations or context that does happen will be stored in an abstract way, locally on your computer for reference here. And then here at the bottom, the 5th one that we do have for all users here is going to be the Playwright MCP. Now this one is actually very interesting. It does allow the AI to directly interact with your browser. So anything that you could do in your browser, typing a URL, entering in a search box, clicking on a button, starring a repo on GitHub, for example, any of these sort of holistic user interactions with a browser or with a user interface, this Playwright MCP will allow your agents to also do those. Now that concludes the list for everyone. Now I do have additionally a specified list here for just engineering or DevOps specific roles. And so those are going to be the following 5 things. The first is the Context7 MCP, which I will actually show you how to set up on this webinar. And essentially this MCP allows you to search, or allows the agent, I should say, to search through a large repository of official documentation sources. So everything from the official Microsoft, .NET documentation to even more specific framework-based or niche tool documentation as well. There's a large repository of thousands of these official documentation sources available through that. And then the next one here is going to be database tools. So obviously we all have some different data stores or data sources that we need to connect to or even just get information from while we're developing. So things like the Postgres MCP, which is officially supported, or the SQL Server MCP. And then additionally, if you do have some more proprietary database technologies such as DB2 or even Oracle, you can use the respective MCPs for those as well. Now that does bring us here to the 3rd bullet, which is going to be the Browser Tools MCP. Now this is a little bit confusing at first because you might think, well, we have the Playwright MCP, that can do browser interactions. So what is the real difference here? And essentially what the browser tools MCP is, it's going to enable agents to look into the browser console. So that's going to be things like error messages in your user interface, or just things that pop up in the terminal console for your browser, as well as just any other network tracking or information that you get from those browser consoles as well. And then to round out the last two here, we do have some cloud specific ones. So things like cloud infrastructure tools, whether you're on AWS or Azure, Google Cloud, any of these platforms, there are a wide variety of MCPs available. So I do have here, AWS MCP servers, multiple. There are dozens of AWS supported MCPs for specific roles and functionalities. One example is going to be the AWS Docs MCP, which will just give you all of that official documentation at your fingertips. Additionally, we do have specific tools for other cloud providers, things like the Azure DevOps MCP. So if you are using Azure DevOps for your workflow, your ticketing, user stories, all of that, there is full support as well. All right, and then the last one right here for cloud automation, again, infrastructure as code, or even just automating data pipelines, things like that. Tools like Terraform and Jupyter Notebooks are obviously industry standards. So being able to connect your AI agents directly to these tools with authentication is obviously a big advantage here for us. All right. So I do also just have the links to all of these different MCPs, here on the slide deck available for you all. So feel free to come look through these if you're interested in trying any of these out. Okay, now let's head over to PureCode AI and take a look at how we can actually configure some of these MCPs and use these servers in our agents. All right, so to get started with MCPs, this is the PureCode extension right here. We do run right on top of VS Code. So to get started with the MCPs, there's two ways to go about it. You can either go here to the settings page and then migrate to the MCPs tab right here. Additionally, if you are in the agent mode, there is a quick icon which you can just click and it will bring you to this page as well. So from here, when we just start, we'll have no MCPs configured. So we can see that, reflected here. It explains what it is, and then there are no MCP servers installed. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is configure our first MCP server. And to go about this, I am going to go through one example of each of the different types that I did mention. So the first will be a local process. The second will be a remote connection through a URL. And the third one is going to be building with Docker. So to get started here, let me just go to the official Context7 MCP GitHub page right here. You can see they have some information about how the tool works, as well as the actual files for the server itself. And then you can see down here the various ways to install. Here, I'm just going to take a look at the base VS Code installation and show you how to use this from here. So essentially, there are two methods for this Context7 MCP, as you can see. The first is going to be the remote server connection. This will just directly connect you to their live running server. But for this demonstration, I am going to do the local server connection. So how this works, you can see there's an npx command right here, as well as this package. It is going to run this Context7 server locally on your machine using npm node. And then from there, you'll be able to connect directly to it. So to actually configure this in your MCP host, I'm going to go back over to PureCode here. And I'm going to edit the MCP JSON right there. So as you can see, there is this file that pops up, config.json, and it has this MCP server's data object structure ready to go here for us. So like I said, the first one that I'm going to do is that Context7. So you can see it has type, stdio, command, and args. These are the core things that we need to understand from this. And then when we go back to PureCode, all we actually have to do to implement this is going to be a little bit of wrapping, and then we can place that code directly from their GitHub page. So to start, I am going to give the name of what I want this to be called. So I'm going to call it Context7. And we'll open a new object here. And then inside this object, we just have a few MCP client host fields that we fill out here. So the first one is going to be name, which is going to be, in our case, we can choose whatever name we want. I'll just say Context7. And then we are also going to have ID. So the ID, this is going to be the tool name that actually shows up in PureCode when it's running. So I will just similarly call this Context7-MCP. And now here we can go ahead and put in the code that we have from that GitHub page. So we just put transport here, which is going to define which type of transport protocol we're using. And then in this object, we can go ahead and just place that information from earlier. So that is going to be type, command, and arguments. Okay, so we can see the type is standard input output, command is npx, and then here are the arguments as well. You will see on the page here, they do have the option to add your API key. I'm just going to use the free tier for now for simplicity, but all you would have to do is give a header here with your API key or put it into the arguments like that. Apologies. Okay. So that is what we have here. We're going to skip the API key for now. And there is one other field that is specific to PureCode here that we need to add, and that is going to be called enabled. And I'll explain that in a second, but we're just going to set this to true as a starting value, and from there we can save. And now when we go back to our PureCode settings to your MCPs tab, you will now see our Context7 MCP is here and connected. You can drop this drop down right here and see the different tools that are available. So essentially, you know, these are the functionalities that this MCP enables in the agent. So the first one is going to be resolve library ID. Essentially, from the context of your prompt, figure out, or of your code base, figure out which tools or which frameworks I need to look up. And then from there, it will use this get library docs tool to go and fetch the actual documentation, pull out relevant pieces for your request, and then load that into context. And now I did mention we have that field here for enabled set to true. What this allows us to do is actually turn these on and off. So apologies there. But essentially you can set these between enabled true and enabled false here. And that will obviously set them to be turned off. So you don't need to remove them from your MCP config, which you would have to do in other hosts. You can just disable them for the time being. All right, set it back to true for now, and we can actually get an example of what it looks like to use this MCP now. So I'm going to pull a short prompt I have, and then make sure that we are in the agent mode here, because the agent mode is going to be the mode that has access to these MCP tools. And I'm just going to simply say, use the Context7 MCP to load the official documentation for ASP.NET and into context, and then give a brief overview of the content that you pulled. So we can just send that. And we'll see here, the agent will ask me if it has permission to use this tool. Right here, the requested tool is Context7 MCP resolve library ID. So that makes sense. Over here, additionally, you can set this between ask you every time and run automatically. For the sake of time today, I'll set it to run automatically. So if it has to do a few searches, it'll be able to just go out and do it for us here. As you can see, your search result wasn't very specific, so I would get the general documentation. And now it's going to actually call that documentation here. You can see from the official Microsoft ASP.NET, documentation source that was successful. And then here's our summary of that documentation. That is just a brief summary here. So that's great. We can see that this MCP works, and now we can move on to the next one. All right. So for our next MCP, what we're going to be doing is configuring a remote server. So this protocol is called SSE, or Server Sent Events, and essentially allows you to connect over an HTTP protocol that does include the extended HTTP, so TLS, SSL, all these other more secure protocols as well. So the MCP I'm going to be configuring is going to be the Figma Dev Mode MCP. So the first step for this MCP, you will need to have the Figma application running on your local machine. And from there, all you have to do is go to your preferences and right here, enable the local MCP server. This will create a route that is running on your local host, essentially. You can also connect to external hosts. This one, it just happens to be local. And from there, we'll connect. So I already have it running and I have the MCP enabled. So all we need to do is go back and edit our JSON file again here. I'll put a comma and we can create our new MCP right here. So I'll say Figma, just call this one Figma. And then for the sake of time, I will just paste in the rest of it. This is going to be all of this. All right, and it's the same as before up until the transport, and you can see the difference here is our transport type is going to be SSE instead of STDIO. And then you can see we just passed a URL right here, which is in our case a local URL. 127.0.0.1 is your local machine if you are unaware. Additionally, we do have this optional field here called timeout. So if you do want to set a max timeout on any of these tools, if they have issues connecting to the host or whatever that may be, you can go ahead and set that here as well. But I'm going to go ahead and save that and move back over here. And we can see now we have our Figma MCP enabled, as well as the different tools here: get code, get variables, get code connected map, get image, metadata, and then create design system rules. So the main ones that we're going to be using are going to be get code and get image as a developer. However, the other ones are relevant for project management and other roles as well. All right, and now to get a quick example of this one, I'm simply just going to say use the Figma MCP to analyze following design and describe it to be, or just let's say describe content that see. And then additionally, I will also give the link here from Figma. So this is going to be a live Figma link. I can just copy the link to this selection right here for this form, and we will be able to get a description of it from our agent here. So you can see I will put that. This is the link from our Figma, and all I have to do is send, and we will get our response. All right, so again, it's a new tool, so it's going to ask me for permission to run it. I'm just going to say, let's run this one time and not give it automated permissions. You'll see here now it wants to probably run another tool just to get the image design, which sounds good to me. Here's our design overview. See, it's a 2-column layout, which is correct. There's a dark blue section on the left. Here's the company information. We take a look back at our Figma design. That is what we're seeing here. Company name, address, contact details, all that stuff is here. And then in our right column, we do have this white form section, as well as the interactive elements and visual design elements as well. So clearly it can access our Figma design. You can see here it did have success with accessing this design as well. And there we go. That's all you need to do to connect your Figma MCP. And I will quickly note, there is also a remote MCP for this one. It's just your preference. If you use it locally already, it's best to use the local for security. Otherwise, you can use the remote server. All right, and that brings us to the final MCP that I'm going to be setting up on this session. And that one is going to be using the Docker protocol. So as you can see here, I do have Docker desktop running on my machine. This is a requirement. You at least need to have a background Docker agent running in the background. So that is the first step to enable this. And once I do configure this MCP, it will build the GitHub server through Docker as a container just on my machine. Okay, so we can go back to our config.json file here, and we can go ahead and add our last section. And so for this one, it is gonna be, again, the same, except for the transport section. That is where you're going to pull all the information from these actual MCP server pages. So right here, we can see this time the type is stdio, standard input output again. However, our command is going to be Docker instead of npx. And then our run arguments run, interactively with these other things. And then additionally here, you do need a GitHub personal access token to essentially assign permissions, what the agent is able to do, read, write access, only read access, things like that. And so down here, we can include this ENV, and I'll show you this is shown on the actual GitHub MCP page itself here. So if we go here, you can see all I did was pull this information out. Instead of command Docker, there's transport stdio before that, and that's the only difference. But you can see the ENV right here, your GitHub token. So I will quickly just show you how to generate that token for the demo. And from there, how to actually set up this MCP. So when you go to GitHub, you're going to want to go over here to your icon and click that. And then from there, you're going to want to go down here to the settings tab. And then after that, you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom here. You'll see developer settings. And then in developer settings, we have personal access tokens right here. Now there are two types, tokens classic and fine-grained tokens. I do recommend the fine-grained tokens as they do just give you more access to the full suite of permissions that you can really find, as it implies fine-grained, tune them to be correct. But here you can see I already have one that I use, but I'm going to just generate a new token here. Apologies, I do need to sign in real quick. All right, so you'll get this basic form. You can give it a token name. I will call it MCP webinar. And you can give it a description if you want to. For now, I'll just leave that blank. You can choose the resource owner as well as an expiration. So you will need to set an expiration on these and refresh them. That is the best practice for security, usually 30 days or less. However, you can make a custom or no expiration token if you want. And then here you give control over access and permissions. So you can say only my public, all of my repositories are only select ones, and select them individually. For now, I'll just go all of them. And then down here, we can actually add permissions individually. So if the best practice here would be to give the least permissions needed for the agent to do the task that you want it to do. So things like maybe reading code, you can see here in actions, GitHub actions, you can set them read only or read write or give no access. And just for the sake of this, I'll just give everything. Quite a few things, and these do have additional levels of permissions that you can set as you see there in the background. But for now, this should be good for me. I definitely don't recommend giving everything permissions. Here you can see we only have read only for most things. That's going to be what you want to do, unless you wanted to create pull requests and things like that. You can give specific write permissions as well. All right, create my new token, generate it. And then you'll see it right here. You only get to see it one time, so you're going to want to copy that and save it somewhere safe. But for us, we can just put it right over here into our configuration. All right, so then we can save that and we go over here. We do now see the GitHub MCP is available. The GitHub MCP specifically, as you can see, has many, many tools, dozens of different tools that you can use, search code, create pull requests, update issues, things like that. All of the essentially things that you would be able to do as a developer. And now for this one, since it does have an API token, I'm just going to refresh my PureCode real quick here, my VS Code, I should say. And now we should be good to go. So we can, in this MCP service, again, just to confirm, we do see it still here active. And now we can go ahead and actually test it out. For this, I'm just going to ask it to use the GitHub MCP and read my repo named real estate website, and then give a brief summary of what the application is, what it's doing. And then, so we don't even need to provide a link here. It will be able to authenticate with our specific GitHub account and then look at whatever we give it permissions to look at. So I'm going to send that. And you can see here, it's going to start by requesting this tool GitHub get me, which is going to get my account information. We'll allow it to do that. And then now it's going to access our repo directly. This one I will set to auto because it's going to want to check a few different things, make sure that it understands the structure and the contents. And then once it finishes analyzing my repo, it will give us that explanation we asked for. And obviously, this is a simple use case. As I said, the GitHub MCP specifically is very, very powerful and can do many, many more things than just reading your repos. All right, and there we go. We do get our summary of the repo that I asked for. This is the name of it. Application overview and architecture, core features, AI-powered analysis, all these different things that are available in our app. See here. And so this is just from the agent being able to connect to the repo, and then the agent is then able to process all of this information, pull out what's relevant, and then give you the answer back. All right, now I do just briefly want to touch on a PureCode feature specifically here. So in terms of MCPs, one of the big concerns is definitely going to be just correct permissions, right? Setting up role-based access, setting up permissions that are correct. So we do have the tool permissions section here. And you can see at the top, these are going to be our built-in MCP tools that we have, things like read codebase, open files, read problems, run terminal commands, and etc. And then below that, we'll get all of the MCP tools that we load in. So anything that you have here, you can also break these down deeper and do per tool permissions. So as you see all these different tools, you can turn individual ones on or off as you need to. And so this just allows you to have fine-grained control over what these tools can actually do. Do they have to ask you for permission to do it? Can they not do it at all? Or are they allowed to just automatically run these different tools? All right. Now, with that said, that is the overview of MCPs, as well as some of the common ones and how to set them up. So let me just get back to this. Here we go. All right, so now that we have seen how to deploy and configure these MCP servers, you've really built the foundational plumbing there to feed rich real-time context into your AI agent, right? But raw context alone doesn't write your code. You need an agent that can consume that context, that can reason on your actual code base, and can even deliver, secure, precise recommendations that are tailored to your specific team's needs. And so this is where our enterprise coding agent, PureCode AI, comes in. PureCode AI is a full stack coding AI copilot coding agent that has been trained and tailored specifically for these legacy code bases, for larger code bases. And really the approach that allows us to do that is going to be our local processes for contexting and creating indexes. And so I can go back to the platform here real quick. And essentially, PureCode AI is designed to fit seamlessly into your existing VS Code workflow. We have a one-click install directly on top of VS Code. So all you have to do is go to extensions here, type in PureCode, and you'll see it come up right here for you. Once you install, all you have to do is open the PureCode tab here on the left and sign in, and then you're ready to go. All right. And now, while this may look like other AI tools that you may have seen here, I know, Copilot and maybe some others, the real, big difference is what lies underneath the hood with PureCode. Our custom indexing algorithms and our proprietary local context engine allow PureCode to create a map of your entire code base fully locally. So that means no indexing of your code is taking place in the cloud, and none of your sensitive data is being stored on any external servers, just on your local machine. And additionally, we don't train any of our AI models on your data, so you can be sure that your IP is safe and secure as it should be. In addition to security and data privacy, our context engine also enables us to have best-in-class understanding of these large and enterprise legacy code bases. And with features like the ability to connect to external knowledge bases, which you can see here, and even set role-based accesses and model controls for the different MCPs and model behaviors, as I showed you in these two other sections. You can really ensure that your team administrators will stay in full control. All right, just reset here for a second. So I do have a quick demo that I can show here of some of these tools, some of these different MCPs working together. So, working in tandem, not just asking for a singular MCP call. So let me just get this set up here for us. This one. Go localhost. I can start this server up for us here. Okay. Pull my server command here. You guys just bear with me for 1 second. All right, so I'm just going to start my local server here. This is a legacy.NET application that I do have set up on my local machine here. So we'll see it pop up here in a second on the right. But essentially, what I can do here is use all three of these MCPs in one single prompt in one go, and then kind of show you how they can work together to really give you strong outputs here. All right, so the first thing that we can see here, we do have this PartsLink Pro, kind of dummy website here. This is, as I mentioned, a legacy.NET. It's not even running .NET course. It's very old and outdated code base here. But essentially, we do have this contact page. We have these 4 different sections where people can kind of contact our different departments and their contact information there, as well as our corporate information over here. And so based on the Figma design that I did show earlier right here, I did have my theoretical designer create a mock-up for a more streamlined user experience. So essentially, we want to remove these 4 sections and this corporate information over here and put it all into this streamlined form that just has a selector here. Okay, so with that in mind, I can go over to my GitHub account, wherever that is here. And I can pull up the repo right here. And as you'll see, I do have one issue that's already been loaded in here by my theoretical project manager. And so in this scenario, essentially what the project manager has done is gone into PureCode using the chat mode, which is essentially more of a traditional back and forth with the agent. And it does have access again to that local code base index. So what it did is it went through, the project manager asked questions about this desired functionality, uploaded this form design and said, I need implementation requirements. So the model spit out some implementation requirements for this form based on the end state. And then from there, that was pasted into here, as you can see, the implementation requirements, and then also the link here to our Figma design. And let me just also make sure it's the right Figma design. So I'm just going to recopy my link here, make sure we have the right one. All right, it looks like we did not, so that's good. All right, but as you can see, there are entity and database setup instructions, with the backend logic. These are essentially the requirements for the end state, and then the front end implementation as well. So we can go ahead and just take the link from up here, pass it to our PureCode agent, and essentially say, run this entire user story from start to finish. So what I'm going to do is have the link right here. And I'll just say use the GitHub MCP to analyze the following link to a GitHub issue, then run the body as the actual prompt. Here is the actual link right there. And I can send that, and it will go ahead and start by asking me if it can use that GitHub tool to fetch the repo and fetch that actual specific issue here, which you can see is issue number 1 on my product launch repo right here. See up here, it is issue number 1. That is correct. So perfect. I've received the GitHub issue or retrieved it. Now I know what to do. Let me examine the Figma design structure. So it sees this Figma link down here and says, okay, I have access to this Figma get code tool. Let me go ahead and try to use that. So I'm going to say you're fine to use that. Go ahead. From here, it will grab that image and the AI will, of our design, and the AI will break it down into understandable components inside of its context. And then here, additionally, it does recognize that this is a .NET repo. So we do automatically load framework instructions for different frameworks. So for this time, it is going to just load some instructions for .NET, and just helps the model have a better performance in the end of the day. And then here we can now see the Context7 MCP is getting resolved. So it's going to go grab some more official documentation here about web forms validation and server controls from that Microsoft official documentation site. And then lastly, the agent's going to use its own internal tools to read through our different code files here locally, and then create an output plan of what it plans to do. Okay, and then after it reads a few different files, just to make sure it understands what it has to do here, it will create our description of the form right there from Figma. And then this is the actual plan that it plans to take. So we do have an optional planning step just within PureCode AI here, which is what you're seeing, and essentially forces the model to output its plan before it takes any actual real steps. So you can see here, this looks pretty good to me. It's going to create our new entity for submission, our database context, edit our front end, back end, and then update our design. So if you did want to make changes, you can just click edit here and add or remove or edit anything that you want to. And then from there, just go ahead and implement. And now our agent will use the existing tools that it does have locally to edit these files in real time. So you can see here, it's going to create this new file called context.submission.c#. Here we can see the file in a preview as well as the diff view. So if there are just changes or updates made to an existing file, you'll see that populate right here as well in this view. And then it does give you this code summary as well, just to give you a brief understanding of what each individual file change is doing. And then lastly, we do have this checkpoint that does spawn before every step the agent takes. So if you ever did want to just compare what has been done since this point, or even restore back to this point in time or before one of these specific steps, all of that, you can do. You can see there's a checkpoint restore after or before every step here. And that was a big file there that it just made, so should be almost done here. Just got to update our backend logic and then probably our design a little bit to match the form. Once this does complete, we'll be able to rebuild this app as well and show you just live on here what the new form looks like in our actual running application. These as well, you can, is one of the permissions you can set, so you can have it allow the user to check the file before it is accepted here. I just have them set to automatically accept for the sake of time here, but you can have this be human in the loop as well. And I'm not sure if you saw there, but we did have some errors in this file in the first generation, and then it went ahead and fixed them. So it can recognize problems in its path that it's already taken and update them accordingly. And here we go. It'll give us our summary of everything that it did. You can also ask it to write a pull request or to do a pull request. It'll create the pull request, write the description, explain everything that it's done, and set that pull request up to your actual GitHub server. But with that said, let me just rebuild the app here real quick. Not sure why it's over here. 1 second. Okay. So I'm just doing a clean rebuild right now, real quick in the background here. Okay. And that is complete. So now we can refresh our page, and in a minute or 10 seconds or so here on this local app, it'll refresh and we can see our new changes. And there you go. Here is our form. I can show you again the design here. So you can see it has the same fields, it has the same coloring and information. The send message button is the same color as well. And it has our 4 different tabs here. This form should also be responsive here. As you can see, is a responsive form by default. That is just matching the existing styling here of our application. There you go. Okay, now let's see. I believe that is everything that I have to show you guys today. So with that said, I can pass it back over to Cam here to wrap things up.
Well, again, everyone, we really appreciate your time and you joining us on this webinar. We're going to have many webinars going forward, so keep a lookout on those. There's always going to be interesting and relevant information that we can educate y'all on. This is obviously a very fast-moving space, so we'll continue to do our best to educate y'all along the way and be a resource for y'all as you continue to do your work and as we continue to grow as a company. So if you do have any questions or need anything from us at the PureCode team, you can email us again at sales@purecodesoftware.com. And again, use that Calendly link to book your own private demo for your team. But thank you again for being here. And Sean, great job today. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And great questions. I really appreciate the engagement from you guys. Thank you all.
All right, everybody have a great day.